I'm very pleased to be here today. I'd like to thank Hans-Martin Schempp and all of the symposium creators, organizers, and implementers. It's an honor to be invited to give a keynote address at this exceedingly important and profound event. The title of my talk is Physics, Metaphysics, and the Evolution of Consciousness toward the Creation of One World Family. You may be wondering what a physicist is doing, speaking about consciousness and one world family, but I hope to convince you, or at least talk to you about the two, the science, the very materialistic view on one hand, and the one world family, the very integrated, holistic view on the other, actually coming together as one thing, not being separate, polarized concepts and ideas, but really all one thing, each supporting the other. Before I can make the case for the creation of one world family being a fundamental evolutionary goal of humanity, or perhaps even an evolutionary inevitability, I must explain the connection between physics, metaphysics, and consciousness, which provides the logic and credibility for understanding the concept of one world family as a human evolutionary imperative. And I must accomplish all that in 15 minutes. Accordingly, I must ask you to forgive me for reading this address, but this subject is very dear to my heart, and I would likely go into much more detail if I do not stick to the script exactly. Indeed, if you look at my lectures on YouTube, you will see that it takes me more than 15 hours to produce a good overview of this subject. In the early 1970s, I began two seemingly incompatible careers that eventually merged into a unique understanding that, among other things, has led me to this podium today. But let me start at the beginning. In 1972, I was a full-time applied physicist by day and a part-time consciousness researcher by night and on weekends. As a physicist, I specialized in modeling large, complex systems with computers. As a consciousness researcher, I defined and explored drug-free, altered states of consciousness and investigated the abilities and limitations of consciousness. Eventually, I was able to merge the study and application of both physics and consciousness into one overall model of reality. The result of this research unites the worlds of objective and subjective experience, thus achieving the goal of generating a unified, comprehensive theory of everything, a TOE, that bridges metaphysics and physics with one scientific understanding. The results of this work are published in the form of the My Big Toe trilogy and in over 200 YouTube videos of my workshops, conferences, and interviews. By the way, the books are free in English on Google Books. And of course, the videos on YouTube are all free as well. The My Big Toe trilogy develops a complete derivation of consciousness. This derivation begins with two assumptions and then proceeds to logically derive all the attributes, limitations, properties, qualities, and mechanics of consciousness and the larger reality. What it is, where it comes from, and how it works. The two assumptions are, one, that consciousness exists just as we experience it. That is, as an information-based, self-aware, self-modifying system, and that evolution exists just as we experience it. That is, as a process of natural selection, a process that will, over time, lead a self-modifying system to better accommodate both internal and external environments. From these two assumptions, all the rest unfolds logically. As it turns out, consciousness is fundamental, and all else is derived therefrom. Metaphysics, that is, ontology, epistemology, cosmology, and theology, and the concepts of God, spirituality, love, morality, free will, as well as human purpose and potential, are all easily derived as logical consequences of the MBT theory of consciousness. Likewise, But more surprising, modern physics is also derived as a logical consequence of consciousness, thus unifying physics and metaphysics as subsets of a single overarching understanding of reality. Many major problems and paradoxes of both physics and metaphysics are solved simply and completely by applying this new perspective. MBT theory accurately predicts the results of scientific experiments and makes new predictions that are experimentally verifiable. It explains the results gathered by the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, that's PAIR, laboratories over the last several decades. It explains why and how the placebo effect works, what preceded the Big Bang, the expanding universe, how mental intent can affect physical reality, the origin, nature, and purpose of us, as well as our universe, what happens after we die, why the speed of light is invariant under the motion of its source, which is the key to deriving relativity, and why particles should be and are naturally probability distributions, which is the key to deriving quantum mechanics. MBT theory explains why and how the double slit experiment and particle entanglement works, how and why precognitive dreams and remote viewing works, as well as a host of other long-standing scientific mysteries. The same MBT logic and science that delivers a better understanding of physics also delivers a model of consciousness and a better understanding of metaphysics. Much that is now considered paranormal becomes simply normal, and the foundation of logic is seen to underlie subjective as well as objective experience. Well, besides all of the above, MBT theory explains and defines love, and how and why love is the answer to humanity's most pressing problems. It explains what each individual can do to find peace, happiness, and satisfaction in this life. It answers the question, what is spirituality and how does one develop it? Many of the readers of my Big Toe trilogy find it life-changing. This is a work to be lived rather than just read. MBT is just now in the process of becoming more widely known. It's a scientific model that everyday, ordinary people can understand and personally apply. The "my" in my Big Toe does not represent pride of authorship, but rather the fact that in this subjective world of consciousness, if it is not your experience, it cannot be your truth. What does this have to do with One World Family, Be the Change? Everything. According to this theory, consciousness, the larger consciousness system, is the source, the core, the creator of everything else. Reality frames, such as our universe or our dreams, are created by information. Consciousness is an information system. Information systems evolve by lowering their entropy. That means increasing their meaningful content, decreasing randomness. And our universe is a computed virtual reality, an experiential entropy reduction trainer to facilitate the evolution of consciousness. Subsets or cells of consciousness called individuated units of consciousness, that's you and I, evolve our individual subsets of consciousness, thus helping to evolve the whole by making free will choices within the context of our interactive experience and by learning from the feedback generated by the results of these choices. Optimal interaction for positive evolution is cooperative, compassionate, and love-based. Love is about other. Its opposite, fear, is about self. We are individuated units of consciousness interacting within a digital virtual reality universe in order to evolve the quality of our consciousness. That is our purpose. That is why conscious entities, such as us, are interacting within this virtual reality. We are here in this entropy reduction, consciousness evolution, virtual reality trainer to become love, to learn, to cooperate, to reduce fear, ego, beliefs, and expectations, to lower entropy of our consciousness by experientially making free will choices from the limited set of choices within our decision space. Now, from the perspective of the big picture just outlined, and from the understanding that consciousness evolution is our fundamental purpose, let's look at the pattern of our physical and consciousness evolution. First, imagine the first biological cell. It's very choice limited, thus very growth limited. One of the most useful things it could do was to split in two and thus generate a larger collection of single cells with which it could interact. The question is, what constitutes their optimal interaction? The answer is coming together and forming a multi-celled organism, a cooperative, interactive structure that increases its complexity, effectiveness, and potentiality of the system, as well as decreasing its own entropy. To create a multi-celled organism, the single cells have evolved to cooperate, thus creating a larger, more effective system, or alternatively, a more effective being. The system becomes a being when it develops its own unique, finite decision space. Next, imagine cell specialization, where cooperative groups of multiple cell structures become organs within one larger, more effective, more capable, lower entropy being. Now imagine that these cooperative, multi-celled, specialized structures become fish, frogs, dogs, and human beings. Do you see the trend? Do you see the repetitive, process fractal nature of reality? At each stage of our development, the most able individual players of each evolutionary level evolve the quality of their interaction to the point that they cooperate with others on their level to form a larger, more complex, more effective, lower entropy organism. Then this new, more complex, lower entropy organism evolves its level of cooperation and interaction to eventually create an even higher order entropy by cooperating with others of its kind at the next higher level of social organization, again becoming part of something of greater potential and lower entropy than the individual members. Do you see the path that our physical evolution in the service of our consciousness evolution has set us to follow? Do you have sufficient hubris to believe that we are somehow not a part of this pattern? Clearly, the task set before humanity is to evolve a more cooperative, caring, and compassionate interaction with each other, with other species, and with the Earth itself to become one larger, more effective system, or one world family. This is not simply wishful thinking. Though I do not have the time today to explain the logical derivation, the concept of one world family represents the logical consequence of a higher level, more complete physics, of an overarching model of reality and consciousness that subsumes the current little picture understanding of physics and reality. Cooperation and caring creates synergy. It creates something greater than the sum of its parts. Cooperation does imply some constraints, but these constraints are never imposed upon the cooperating individuals. Some, from their basis in fear and belief, think that cooperation necessarily limits individual freedom. Instead, a plethora of new opportunities and new dimensions for the expression of freedom are generated at the personal level, producing a more useful and profitable experience for everyone. Effectiveness, value, and functionality are optimized for individuals as well as for the cooperative whole. What is this fundamental urge, this drive we have to implement a cooperative, caring, coming together? It represents the vector of evolutionary progress within an evolving consciousness system. We feel it as an innate nudge to move away from a more constrained, competitive existence to a freer, more expansive, cooperative one, from being self-focused to being other-focused. That is, moving away from fear, ego, belief, and expectation toward love. This process has been called spiritual growth, increasing the quality or decreasing the entropy of one's consciousness, growing up and living in the big picture with within the larger reality of consciousness, and expressing our oneness with all beings within the larger consciousness system. In human terminology, other-focused is the defining characteristic of love. Each cell, and here I use a larger, more general concept of the word cell that includes you and I, each cell is a free agent within its own decision space, and that decision space increases, not decreases, with cooperation. Each cell does what it does because of what it chooses to do, not because what it is forced to do. In a cooperative system, no cell or being is forced to make any particular choice. Each individual member of the cooperative group always has free will to choose from among the choices that lie within its enhanced decision space. Unfortunately, most of us find it almost impossible to imagine a social condition of cooperation, compassion, and love. We can only imagine competitive individual freedom that is defined in terms of scarcity and conflict. That is in terms of our fear and ego. Why is this? Because we define ourselves and our relationships in terms of our fear and our ego. People have a fear of being forced, coerced, or pressured because force, coercion, and pressure, manipulation, and imposed outside requirements of some sorts is all that we know. And what is worse, it's a very large part of what and who we are. Fear will necessarily become the driver of you and your reality if you do not interact within a community of cooperation, caring, and love. Fear erodes trust. Without trust, cooperation is impossible. Without cooperation, we all stand alone in fear. When biological cells stop cooperating, stop working together effectively, or invaded from outside, or invade others, we call it disease. When biological cells get greedy, or begin building their own little non-cooperative empires within the cooperative body, or begin to consume more than they contribute, we call it cancer. The same applies to human cells within our social system. We need to grow up, to evolve the quality of our consciousness, to become the cells of the cooperative, caring, compassionate, well-balanced organism that it is our eventual evolutionary destiny to become. It took the bacteria and the primitive multicelled critters, and then the complex critters with specialized organs, about 1 billion years of random mutation and the trial and error of natural selection to lower their entropy, improve their effectiveness, and evolve to successively higher levels of cooperation. It has been a very slow process. Because humans are a lot smarter and much more aware than a bacterium or an amoeba, we don't have to wait for random mutations. Instead, we can think and plan and create our future. And as a result, after only a few million years, we are beginning to see more and more symposiums and conferences like this one, and cooperative caring projects like those that you will hear discussed today, focused on encouraging and building global and individual cooperation, caring, and compassion. This is good news. I think we, as a race, are just beginning to grasp our evolutionary imperative, to understand our quest, and are finally taking a few first tottering steps toward implementing our evolutionary destiny of becoming one world family. What you see here today is proof that the long-awaited and arguably inevitable evolution of humankind into one world family is alive and well, gathering momentum and gathering crowds of supporters, such as yourselves. It is a fact that all significant change must be implemented at the individual level. So, what can you as individuals do to implement this profound evolutionary metamorphosis? How can you move from being part of the problem to becoming part of the solution? Well, Mahatma Gandhi said it best. Simply be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you.